Hello friends, my name is Volantis and we've got quite the challenge on our hands today. I've got tons of ideas for Dead Space challenges, including single gun runs, but because there are 7 of them in the game, I wanted to know what the most challenging one would be, so I took to Reddit to find out. I put up a poll on the Dead Space subreddit asking what the worst gun to attempt a single weapon playthrough would be, and literally half of you guys voted that the Flamethrower would be the worst. So today I attempt to beat Dead Space 1 with only said Flamethrower. Yeah, I'll address that little guy in a minute. But simple enough, right? Well, no. You see, I doubt there's enough flame fuel in the universe to beat the game with that and nothing else. I'm already familiar with how quickly it burns through ammo, no pun intended, and it stands to reason that the early game is the worst with that since it won't be upgraded yet. Even if you had the money to stockpile enough flame fuel to blaze through the first 2 chapters, pun intended, it doesn't matter since flame fuel can't be purchased until chapter 3. So that brings me to rule number 1. Here's why I put that little asterisk on Flamethrower. The Flamethrower is the only gun I'm allowed to use, and that ties into rule number 2. I can still use Stasis, Kinesis, and Melee simply because you can't get rid of those abilities and I'm expecting them to be necessary. But to make you feel better, I'll at least try to use up all of my flame fuel before relying on Melee to finish the job. Oh, also, because I don't feel like saying Stasis, Kinesis, and Melee every time I refer to them together, I'll just say scam. Now, rule number 3. The Flamethrower isn't available until the start of Chapter 2. Because I'm an embarrassment with no gaming PC that can just mod it into the start of the game, I have 2 options. Either play through the game and not upgrade anything, making sure to purchase the Flamethrower along the way so that I can start a quote, new game with it, or option B, suck it up and tough out Chapter 1 with no gun. So I went with the latter. Basically, I'll have to do all of Chapter 1 by strategically using Stasis and Melee. As for the difficulty, I will be playing on hard mode, as will likely be the standard going forward with my challenges. Hard mode is considered harder than the normal difficulty in any game, obviously, but also not so hard that the difficulty spike of the game itself should render the self-imposed challenge pointless. Okay, all of that seems like enough of an explanation, so let's begin. Everything was going great. I woke up at the butt crack of dawn, had some breakfast, and was on my way to see my woman. But just as we near the end of our road trip, our pilot has a massive stroke and crash lands us on the Ishimura. Alright, great start. Well, as long as we're here, we might as well make ourselves comfortable.
What the hell was that?
The hell?
I'm the boogeyman, and I'm coming to get you.
Jesus! Open fire! Open fire!
Well, shit. Can anything go right today? The thunderous clap of my cheeks as I hoofed it to the elevator scared away the crusty boys, and I escaped, relatively unscathed. Here's where we hit the first minor inconvenience. I had no intention of picking up the plasma cutter, but the game, like the dirty, rotten asshole it is, makes you do it. Isaac is incapable of using his fists and his feet until he holds that cold, shiny Deathbringer in his claws. So for now, I guess we'll just not use it. Luckily, this first necromorph can be easily avoided. Smash the breaker box, let it jump out like the spooky little goblin it tries to be, and then laugh in its dumb face and give it the finger as you run on by. Okay, time for a new strat. In all of my years playing this game, I never tried actually avoiding enemies. I always just let my testosterone bubble to the surface and obliterate all those moldy lobsters like the death machine I am. But I had no choice this time. I wanted to test out baiting an attack, so I used this little faker right here. We'll call him Eric. I wanted to see if I could get close enough to trigger Eric's fight response, then quickly juke him before getting hit. And surprisingly, it worked. Kinda. The thing is, baiting and dodging Eric's attack isn't so hard, it's being able to run back up on him at just the right spot and give him a quick whack before he hurts me, or just blocks my swing entirely. It's not too reliable, but it is doable to kill Necros this way. The other Necros in the tram room went pretty much the same, except I had Stasis now to make it easier. Same thing with the Slasher and the Leaper in the hall on the way to retrieve the data board. The maintenance bay, however, was a different story, and here's where the challenge begins. Because there are approximately a fuck-jillion slashers in this room, I very quickly went from death machine to little bitch baby, and cried as I ran past everything. Hammond and Kendra insist I try to restart the Kellyanne for us to leave, but that would mean not getting to see my girlfriend, and thus, not getting laid. So I spilled some soda on the console. Oops. I then just yeeted myself past the Necros here on the flight deck so that I can just be done with this chapter. Chapter 1 done, yay, woohoo! Now we have the power of hell itself in the palm of our hands. Got a reanimated corpse you need out of your way? No problem.
Just roasted into oblivion.
Yes, I now have the Flamethrower. I also got the Kinesis module, so now I can throw things at scary monsters. Alright, now the real challenge begins. The lab quarantine was the first hard part of the run. I knew I'd have to be stingy with my flame fuel, so I opted to try my strategy from my impossible mode run, where I trap the necros in the office room with the floor hatch and try to burn multiple at the same time. Fuck. So the next attempt went better, of course. I had to trail the brain-dead butt cakes around both floors, burn off their legs, and then trap them in the office. I kept running out of fuel though, so I had to resort to melee to finish the job. In diagnostics, I tried chucking the fat battery at the leapers to kill them, but I'm not sure it really did anything, so I gave them what I call the icy hot treatment. Freeze them in place, then burn them alive. I took out the slasher here too, and then used the opportunity to give my flamethrower a complete refill with a capacity upgrade. In the zero gravity chamber, after you pick up the thermite, there are a couple leapers that spawn in, but I blew them back to hell with the flame canisters. Not exactly the right kind of flame, according to the challenge, but I said Kinesis was fine, so suck it. Next roadblock, the emergency room. I knew my ammo wouldn't take out everything between here and the morgue, so I had to strategize. I took care of the lurkers without much trouble, but the next hall would prove problematic. I refilled my stasis, killed the first lurker and slasher, refilled my stasis, killed the next 3 slashers, refilled my stasis, tried to collect a couple extra items, and then got gawked by Edward Scissorhands. Ass! The game, in its infinite wisdom, respawned me before the entire hallway I just did, so that's cool. 3 more deaths, and I stealthily grabbed the item boxes from down the hall instead because I don't want to do that shit again. An enhanced slasher and an infector attack in the morgue, and those two together were near the top of my list of things I did not want to fight while low on ammo. So basically, my strategy was to stasis them, blast them with what little bit of Satan's breath I had left, then stomp a mud hole in them to finish them off. Sounds good, right? Yeah, except I kept dying when just one more shot of stasis would have gotten me the dub. So I hoofed it back to get more stasis, saved, then obliterated the undead bitches with my massive clodhoppers. And then the slasher on the way back got a lucky hit on me. I let it kill me so I wouldn't have to waste a health pack, and the game, in another stroke of genius, made me redo the morgue. Okay, but why though? Repeat morgue, freeze the slasher, run away, chapter done. Fond memories of chapter 3, but we'll discuss that in just a minute. I started out by buying a couple of power nodes and upgrading my flamethrower's damage. I ran out of flame fuel, killing the slasher that blocks your path here, and I took the opportunity to upgrade my capacity for a free ammo fill-up. The refueling part wasn't too hard. I died once to the slashers after the gondola, but got some revenge and sent them back to hell. Ah, my old nemesis, the centrifuge. You don't scare me, you son of a bitch. I completely obliterated the 4 leapers in this room with flame canisters and prepared myself to attempt the centrifuge once again. Okay, let's do this. Cool. The first tentacle grab was surprisingly easy. Nothing else to say about it, really. Pretty routine stuff between here and the engine room, which I fully expected to be tricky dicky. This is where the real challenge begins. I was really low on flame fuel for this fight. There are flame canisters here, but not enough to kill all 3 stages of necromorphs. A few attempts later, and I managed to kill all 3 of the slashers that welcome you, along with the pregnant and its little bug babies. I started the engines and used the canisters to blow away what necros I could before using up the rest of my flame fuel defending myself. Luckily, you don't have to kill every necromorph, just a few of them and then you can dip out. I made it back to the control room and demolished the slasher that tries to be sneaky. I ran out of ammo, so of course I used the opportunity to upgrade my capacity. Now chapter 3 is done. The idea of fighting not 1, not 3, but 2 brutes had me a little panicked in GL. I bought a metric shit ton of flame fuel, upgraded my suit to level 3, and prepared for the first brute. I don't know what happened, but it was literally so fucking easy. Dodging its charge attack was way easier than I thought it would be, and stasis and flamethrower alt fire made short work of this beefcake. I think maybe it glitched into the wall or something too. It looked like it got stuck, but whatevs, it's still a win for old Volantis. The second brute was a little tougher than the first because of the room you fight it in, but the stasis recharge made it more than tolerable. One of the slashers in the admin room killed itself like the brainless ass it is, which helped me immensely, so thanks my guy. The rest of the chapter is pretty straightforward. The ADS cannon part doesn't require killing anything. Making my way back to the bridge, I knew I wouldn't be able to kill all the leapers with what little ammo I had left, so I just booked it for the tram. Chapter done. Okay, given that chapter 5 is where you're introduced to the hunter, and I hate that miserable bastard, I fully expected to finish it with either catastrophically high blood pressure, or a catastrophic amount of shit in my pants. But actually, due to my god tier gamer reflexes, I did not die a single time. Now we come to our first encounter with a wall guardian. These things are pretty damn tanky, so I assumed I would not have enough flame fuel to take it out. Instead, I opted for the one-hit KO with the nearby explosive canister. Haha, suck my ass. I was hella nervous waiting for Dr. Junkless to introduce me to the regenerator.
Our future, your future, the future of our race ends here.
Oh my god, who the hell cares?
I hate being chased by this thing. But to my surprise, it's actually easy to bait and dodge its attacks until Kendra unlocks the door. All you've got to do is burn a leg off, then make like a baby and head out. The ambush in the emergency room was way easier than anticipated, and Guardian number 2 went down just like the first. Then Dr. Junkless tries to unalive me by turning off the oxygen. A tactically genius move, honestly, since my gun relies on oxygen to work, so I had to flex my gamer muscles again and run at Mach 5 speed past everything. Let's be honest though, I wouldn't have fought anything here anyway. I am what you would call a pussy. The cryogenics lab wasn't any more difficult than usual, which is nice. So we give the hunter the Walt Disney special, and we're officially done with the medical deck. Phew. Okay, here's where the real challenge begins. We make our way up to hydroponics, and our first order of business is to deal with Guardian number 3. But unlike the last chapter, we can't use explosive canisters, meaning it's flamethrower for the kill, or accept the first failure. I expect to use a lot of ammo if I'm able to kill it at all. And wouldn't you know it, I was right. It took a few tries to dodge getting pelted by 1,000 spit wads, but I fed the Guardian enough hot Cheeto dust until its acid reflex was too much to handle. So we're still in this. That is, until we get to the East Chamber. We make short work of the brute here, and it's time to focus on the poison pods, also referred to as Weezers. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where the run dies. Maybe. The game treats the poisoned air produced by the Weezers just like it does a vacuum, rendering the flamethrower absolutely useless. Now I can just melee them, no big deezy, I haven't failed my challenge. But if you're going true flamethrower only, you can't kill them that way, you have to use something else. So I stomped the stinky juice from these hunchbacks. Then we hit another roadblock. This particular one here in the nutrient vat cannot be meleeed. Oof. I stealthily brought some explosive canisters from the floor above, but had an easier job blowing myself to bits than the poison pod. I had two options. Try using kinesis to throw objects at it and hope that it dies, or accept a failure of the challenge and use a different gun. I tried some brute limbs and some box fragments, but I had no luck. I accepted defeat and just grabbed my plasma cutter and off that sumbitch. Hey boys and girls, future Volantis here. A little later in the game, I started wondering if maybe I was just doing that part wrong. I don't like to look up if other people have done the same challenge as me, but curiosity got the better of me. I found a YouTuber named The Backlogs who did a flamethrower and kinesis only video, and he was able to kill this Weezer using kinesis. So that proves it is possible to kill it without a different gun, and therefore I'm undoing my failure. Okay, back to the video. The West Chamber went fairly smoothly, despite the seemingly unending amount of necromorphs. The flamethrower's alt fire starting to demolish these crusty jabronis. I put the last upgrade into the flamethrower in preparation for the Leviathan. I wasn't too nervous about this fight since the flamethrower was my saving grace in my no running challenge. The problem is that the flamethrower damages the tentacles slower than other guns do. I spent more time dodging the slams and tanking hits than I would have liked, but the Flamethrower is ace against the Leviathan's second and third phases. It's not that it does more damage, but you can pop off an alt-fire blast while it prepares to attack and stun it immediately. It takes quite a few shots, but for the most part you can just stand far away and force enough down its throat to give it a fatal case of firehole. I'm going to try changing it up a little. The Flamethrower is maxed out now, so I really tried to go Flamethrower only on most fights, unless Stasis made it so that I could save a buttload of ammo. At least this was my strategy. It lasted all of about 2 chapters. The fun part about only using the Flamethrower is that some chapters that are usually a breeze become fucking nightmares. Exhibit A, Chapter 7. I pretty much ran by everything I could on the way to the gravity beam room. The room itself, though, was a nuisance. A cacophony of slashers, camera sabotage, and my own incompetence made for a miserable experience, just like anyone involved in my sex life. Okay, now down to Deck D. I didn't want to waste ammo on the gondola pods, so I tried to just avoid the projectiles, but it was not easy. These pods can fuck a dick.
It feels like it's been so long. But I can help you.
What? I can't hear you.
Okay, just gotta defend my woman while she very
slowly
unlocks the door for me. It's okay though, I've never failed this part before.
Shit.
This fight is fucking ridiculous. The alt-fire has to be so precise to damage the Necros. It took 7 tries, which really isn't that bad, but it's really painful when you get to the very end of the fight every time and then just fail. I make a detour to upgrade to the level 4 suit, and our next task is to destroy the gravity tethers holding the asteroid in place. Simple enough. Except, it's not. The first 2 tethers inside the ship are breakable with the Flamethrower. The problem is the other 2 tethers are outside the ship. You know, in the vacuum of space. So, what do we do now? Well, my first thought was melee, but neither stomping nor punching it worked. I tried blasting stuff at it, but again, that was useless. I did check the Backlogs video again, and he had the same luck. As annoying as it was for such a simple part to be the run killer, I figured something would stop me eventually. I backtracked to grab the plasma cutter and used it to destroy the last 2 tethers, and accepted the disappointing loss of the challenge. But that wouldn't stop me from continuing to burn big gaping holes in every crusty bitch that infests this ship.
I hope you choke on a motherfucking cheese stick, you nasty, greasy bitch. You look like you drink white Gatorade and smell like nickels. Fuck you.
All that's left is to launch the asteroid. You've got one tiny room to eliminate 2 crusties and 2 super crusties. I died a couple of times, but was successful on the 3rd attempt. Then on the elevator back to the tram, I nearly got my cheeks clapped. I survived without even a single pixel of health left. If a Necro so much as breathed in Isaac's direction, he'd explode. But nevertheless, this chapter is complete. Chapter 8 is normally one of the shortest in the game, but using only the Flamethrower completely throws that idea out the window. Here's what we have to look forward to. An ambush consisting of 8 exploders, 2 enhanced slashers, and an enhanced leaper, a double guardian fight, a divider immediately after that, and another divider at the end. Normally it'd be easy peasy, but this run is anything but normal. It also doesn't help that I'm currently on my deathbed and have almost no ammo. The atrium was hard as balls. I tried trailing the exploders and getting them to blow each other up, but the threshold to bait an attack while also not getting blown up is almost non-existent. I managed to do it only a single time across 9 tries, so I just opted for burning them up instead. The 3 Necros immediately after weren't as tricky though. I got just enough ammo between kills and item lockers to get by. With this fight finally out of the way, I took an opportunity to upgrade my rig health for a free full heal. Now here's where the real challenge begins. I was now facing the most frightening part of my run so far, the double guardians. I knew from my experience in Chapter 6 that these things are freaking ammo vacuums, so is beating 2 of them even possible? As it turns out, yeah it is, you just need an ass ton of flame fuel. I gave the Guardian Hall a few tries and either kept dying or running out of fuel before even killing the first one. So I traded in a few large med packs and stocked up on more flame fuel and gave it a few more tries. I did notice during this chapter that act would become very common. I was often running into fights I had to deal with but not having enough ammo for it, so I'd have to sell what little I had and then spend all my money on flame fuel. But anyway, back to the Guardians. Miraculously, I had enough to take out both of them. What really helped was instead of wasting fuel killing the pods it spits out, I would just duck behind the doorway, pop out to give the Guardian a devil's belch, then duck back in, rinse and repeat. The tricky part was learning the sweet spot to shoot so that its tentacles would burn up and fall off. After a bit of trial and error, I got them both. Oh, and before you ask, no, you can't just run past them. They insta-kill you if you go for the door. And no, using stasis doesn't work. And no, killing one doesn't make it possible to squeeze past the other one. You have to kill both of them. I did not want to bother with the divider, and lucky for me, I didn't have to. I stasised it and just ran by. The good thing is, once the Guardians are dealt with, you don't have to kill another enemy for the rest of the chapter. So I fixed the comms array and took out the slug boss as per usual. So with all that taken care of, I booked it past the divider in the atrium and the pregant right after and hopped on the tram, ending the chapter. Now we must venture to unfamiliar land. We have to descend to the gross, smelly bowels of the Valor and retrieve its singularity core. Now this is where the real challenge begins. If any creature, real or fictional, deserves to burn in hell, it's Twitchers. And wasps too, I guess. Fuck wasps. Anyway, Twitchers are fast.
I'm fast as fuck, boy. Still fast as fuck, boy. Come get some.
Yeah, that means they're good at dodging shots, and the alt fire only stuns them once, if at all. I died a few times without much progress, so I resorted to using stasis, since I kept burning through a lot of flame fuel without it, and then getting chopped to death before I could get enough shots off to kill them all. After dealing with the infectors and taking the elevator, the next few rooms house a divider, a handful of exploders, and some Twitchers. I did not expect to get through it without sacrificing a large amount of flame fuel, which I did not want to do going into the barracks fight. Conveniently though, there is a room in this section that has a laser dissector that insta-kills anything. So very carefully, I ran at the speed of light through the first room of enemies and started baiting exploders and Twitchers into the laser room. With some trial and error, I managed to maneuver around the laser and have it kill everything else while I stayed physically intact. I backtracked to kill the divider and to complete the shooting gallery minigame. This game, by the way, is a real pain in the ass with the flamethrower. Alright, with all of that taken care of, we now come to the barracks. I affectionately refer to this fight in my last challenge as Necrodoodle Casserole, a smorgasbord of butt cakes, if you will. You are probably wondering just how long it took me to get through this room. Hours? Maybe even days? Oh no. No, my friends. It took me one single try. One! Yes, I have once again proved I am an elite level gamer, the likes of which no one has ever seen. Bow down to my skill. No, but really, despite completing it in one try, I ran out of flame fuel before everything was dead, so I had to run around and think of something quickly before being made into engineer stew. I stasised an exploder to get away from it, and this is what saved me, but not in the way you'd think. Because I ran right by it, it triggered the exploder to attack, but because it was stasised, it was too slow to hurt me. And luckily, it killed itself and the pregnate at the same time. All I had to do after that was let the dumbass lurker kill itself on the gravity panel, and the barracks are done. I retrieved the precious, only to get stopped by a brute that desperately wants Hammond's raspberry jam. It wasn't satisfied and starts coming after my raspberry jam. No, my jam, bitch. The Valor was a treasure trove of, well, treasure. I ended this chapter with a few power nodes, some extra flame fuel, and enough credits to buy the next suit. Things are looking up. Chapter 10 starts like it always does. Stomp the bodies, do the 0G basketball, kill the zombiesies, and get the level 5 suit. I also upgraded my health. I refuse to give Dr. Junkless even a second more of my attention, so let's just skip ahead a couple minutes. Down in the mess hall, you have to grab the crew key while trying not to get slaughtered by the dividers. Normally, I would just use one of my overpowered death rays on them, but I chose flight instead of fight this time to save some ammo. Surprisingly, I got the crew key and dipped before they could clap my cheeks. Time for another Guardian. Same deal as before, they're just gluttons for flame fuel. The tentacle grab part in the sleep bunks was a real smack in the ball bag. It takes much more abuse this time around, which means having to burn through a lot of fuel. It took a few tries to burn that bitch to a crisp without getting swallowed by the butthole. Bunks B was another fun ride. I do usually loot this area, but since my only weapon is useless and I don't have the health packs to tank a bunch of hits, I had to pass up the extra resources. Okay, time for the most pants-shitting part of the game. Dr. Junkless sends the Nemesis after us, and things aren't looking good. But here's the good news. You can either kill all the necromorphs in this room, or wait roughly 90 seconds for Kendra to get her shit together and unlock the door. So that's exactly what I did. After taking out the Purgerts, it's time for the final showdown with the Hunter. Fortunately, I was able to deal with the Twitchers in here relatively painlessly by using stasis. I freeze and then burn the Regenerator alive. Dr. Dingleberry takes my space boat, Dr. Junkless gets his jam sucked out, and we take the tram out of here. Let's just breeze through Chapter 11, shall we? It isn't much different than a normal run for the most part. The cargo room requires a quicker trigger finger though, and took me a few tries to get through the entire thing. Quick tip for that room, BT dubs. Go back out and save your game each time you spawn and kill the necromorphs to act as a checkpoint. The game doesn't give you any checkpoints in this room, so if you die, you'd have to do it all over again. As I said, this chapter is pretty much like normal. The Flamethrower only made it slightly more difficult. I cleared out the flight lounge, collected the secret ruby semiconductor and the Peng statue, loaded up the marker, watched Dr. Dingleberry spill some raspberry jam on his shirt, dealt with another Guardian, and reunited with my woman. Nicole is a total bro and helps me take back my space boat from that wretched traitor, and now all that's left is to make our way down to the planet. Alright, we're in the home stretch, boys. I need to have enough resources to get me past the quarantine and the 2 Guardians, so I sold a buttload of useless junk, stocked up on fuel and power nodes, and upgraded my stasis duration before heading into the quarantine fight. The slashers were really the only hard part of this ambush, and likely would have clapped my cakes if not for stasis. I probably could have gotten by in enough tries without it, but I didn't feel like potentially spending 1,000 years in this room. Can't let my guard down yet, as I've got to clear out the next room of Guardians and their little tentacle beans. As per usual, it took a metric shit ton of flame fuel to kill them. And there are approximately a fuck-jillion beans left over to roast alive. The brute was a massive bitch, the weak kind, not the annoying kind. And now we come to the excavation site. I decided I would try a new strat right from the start. I ran to the far end of the loading platform, and the plan was to drag the marker along from a distance and let the tentacles kill all the necros. This did not work very well. Aside from the tentacles wanting to kill me more than those walking pieces of ass fudge, I had now backed myself into a corner and couldn't kill the necros without taking a lot of damage. I did kill most of them, but the tentacles got the last laugh. It took a bit of trial and error, but by being more strategic with stasis and alt fire, and knowing where the tentacles slammed the platform, I did manage to load the marker up with just a tiny little sliver of health left. All that's left now is the final boss. Let me tell you, this fight is ass with the Flamethrower. Let's just go step by step. Stage 1, you have to shoot its eye sac things. Because I know how Stage 2 operates, I chose to damage each one a little at a time, as I usually do. So when it does its spooky scream thing at me, I blast it with alt fire. This, however, would end up being a fatal error. After blasting 3 eyes, it'll string you up by the willies for Stage 2, shooting the remaining 2 eyes upside down. Easier said than done. Aiming during this is hard enough, but with the painfully slow speed that the Flamethrower fires at, it's damn near impossible. On the first try, I got yeeted. On the next try, my aim was just barely good enough to not get yeeted, so I got yeeted. And then I died anyway. Fuck. With this fight's cutscene permanently seared into my brain, let's try again and amend the strategy this time. I used primary fire to deal damage slower, that way when I'm upside down and can't aim for shit, I'll have as little damage as possible left to do to each eye. This was a masterstroke of genius, if I may be so bold. All that's left was stage 3, blast away its heart sacs until it succumbs to my flame of eternal sleep. This phase isn't too hard. The only annoying part is if it cycles through its attack and you don't blow up one of its weak points, it'll spit 2 purg nuts at you, and those are always fun to deal with. But regardless, I cooked up all the little spider bitches that wanted a piece of my cake. One at a time, I slowly burned away the hive mind's chest sacs, forcing it to succumb to a deadly amount of heartburn. Eventually, I put it down. With only 4 deaths in this fight, this game is now done. So now that the entire game is finished, where do we stand on the challenge? Well, let's quickly review. I stated at the beginning and several times during the run that the flamethrower was the only gun I was allowed to use and that stasis, kinesis, and melee were allowed as well. Within those rules, the only time I failed was in Chapter 7, where you destroy the gravity tethers. You have to use a different gun there, at least in my experience anyway. Overall, this wasn't the hardest challenge I've ever done, but goddamn was it annoying at times, and I really don't want to have to do it again. I'd rather take a fork and scratch my eye. I'd rather French kiss a dog that just scarfed its own anus. I'd rather aggressively teabag a bowl of cactus needles. But I'm gonna do it anyway. Remember that part I said in the beginning where my first option was to play through the game once and then attempt the challenge part? I have 2 options. Either play through the game and not upgrade anything, making sure to purchase the flamethrower along the way so that I can start a quote, new game with it. Or option B, suck it up and tough out Chapter 1 with no gun.
See? I did say that.
Yep, I did it anyway. I'm not satisfied with the results of the first run, so let's make some changes. I replayed a new game on hard mode, and this time I used only the plasma cutter, which isn't important, but I wanted the 1 gun achievement, so 2 birds 1 stone. But on this run, I wasn't allowed to upgrade my suit, my stasis, or my rig. I made sure to collect the flame fuel schematic and to buy the flamethrower and toss it into my inventory before the final boss, so that everything is base level at the start of the new game. Here's the footage right before the hive mind fight to show you everything besides my plasma cutter is at base level. Here's my stasis, here's my rig, kinesis, here's the flamethrower. And here you can see, since the other suits are available at the store, that I'm still equipped with the level 1 suit. So doing a new game this way will not only ensure I have the flamethrower to start, but I'll also be able to buy flame fuel as soon as I reach the first store. But to make it fair, I will throw away all of my extra items and money to make it a true new game experience. Power nodes can't be thrown away though, so I'll just keep my stock no lower than the 22 I have at the start here. I'm pretty confident now that you can do all necessary fights with just the flamethrower. The issue is whether or not the game gives you enough fuel, or you can buy enough to get by, and whether you can be quick enough to use it without stasis at all. So this time around, I'm sticking with flamethrower only rules. That means no scam, but with 3 notable exceptions. 1. Environmental items and obstacles that are only designed to be used with stasis and or kinesis. You know, batteries, this thing in diagnostics, malfunctioning doors, etc. 2. Items that are otherwise out of reach. If I want an item and can walk to it to pick it up, I have to do so, but I can use kinesis if resources aren't accessible without it. And 3. Melee for breaking item boxes. Although I did realize late game that it only takes 1 unit of flame fuel to break them, so ultimately it makes no difference. But once I realized that, I did use my flamethrower to break them open for the rest of the game, if that somehow makes you feel better. But anyway, the spirit of this challenge is really to defeat as many enemies as possible with only the flamethrower. Aside from Chapter 6 and 7, I want to see just how far I can get using only the ammo and money I collect from this playthrough. Now that I've had an entire game to practice using the flamethrower, maybe it'll go smoother than I expect. Let's find out. So in a new game, you start out with 0 credits and 0 power nodes. I started this run with 738,875 credits and 22 power nodes. So I will make a note of how many credits I'll end up with when I reach the store, and we'll deal with that when we get there. Chapter 1 isn't much different with the flamethrower. Since I can get through it without any gun at all, it stands to reason that using the flamethrower instead of melee isn't much of an issue. I had enough ammo, so I didn't have to resort to using melee or stasis at all. Oh my god! Okay, we've reached the store, and I have a whopping 751,875 credits. Subtract what I started with, and that means I've obtained 13,000 during this first chapter. So I've got to buy and toss a bunch of junk to get my credits down to 13,000. It was very painful to have to do, but the quickest way I found was to buy an inventory full of large med packs, then throw them away like month-old leftovers, rinse and repeat. I also had to throw away the extra items already in my safe. Throughout this first chapter, I collected 78 plasma energy shots, 1 large med pack, and the plasma cutter. I sold the plasma energy to buy flame fuel, and stored the plasma cutter in the safe. I also have the option of immediately upgrading to the level 2 suit, but I'm gonna try something else to save a little money. I'm gonna skip upgrading to the level 2 and 4 suits, and just go for 3 and 5. It'll save me 45,000 credits, which is definitely useful, and I don't think it'll make the game that much harder. Chapter 2 went much better this time around, since I'm a beast at using the alt fire now. I got through both the med lab quarantine and the morgue on my first try without relying on stasis. No fails yet. Chapter 3 played out a bit differently though. Normally I stomp corpses when I know infectors will be there later, but melee is not an option. So I have to either suck it up and fight extra enemies, or use my flame fuel to burn their limbs off. Using up extra ammo could bite me in the ass later. I also was not allowed to use explosive canisters with kinesis. I had to shoot them directly, which is easier said than done. The flamethrower doesn't have the best accuracy after all. I died on the little gondola part because I suck ass. I was trying to shoot the canister, but I couldn't hit it right, so I got shanked. On the next try, I accidentally fired a stasis shot when I meant to heal, so I welcomed death gracefully so I could try again. Eventually, I got past all that bullshit, and it's time for the centrifuge again. Here's the fun part. If you don't kill the 4 leapers that spawn when you're fixing the centrifuge, which I did not do, they will still be there when you activate it. See? Super fun, right?
Wrong!
I obviously couldn't use the canisters to kill the leapers, and I didn't feel like using up a bunch of flame fuel either, so I guess I get what I deserve. Basically, I had to just dodge more necros than normal to get out of here. I got through the engine room in 1 try this time, but I did take quite a bit of damage. I tried shooting the canisters again, and surprisingly, it worked this time. Wow! I managed to blow up the last slasher mid-attack. It was badass. Chapter 4 went just as it did the first time. I upgraded to the level 3 suit and deal with the 2 brutes. They are surprisingly easy to beat without stasis, and the flamethrower's alt fire makes short work of them. I did kill the leapers that attack in the atrium this time though, easy peasy. Everything on the second run has been going just fine, but it's like Chapter 5 existed just to fuck with me. First order of business, kill the Guardian, but the hard way. This is where the real challenge begins. It took so much flame fuel that I ran through 2 tanks during the fight, used a nearby bench to get a capacity upgrade, then used a whole nother tank just to finish off the big bitch. First one down. The ER part went fine, and with enough patience and a probably illegal amount of fire, I took out the next Guardian. I got all the way to Dr. Junkless's office, and no items spawned in it. Not even the audio log. That has literally never happened to me before. And of course it happens on a run where I need as many resources as I can get. I died once on the way back to the ER because I suck a poo-poo and I kept having issues with my controller disconnecting. Between the 2 Guardians, the regenerator, the game keeping items from me, and my malfunctioning hardware, I'm blown away I only died twice in this chapter. I'm gonna take a break and fix my shit. BRB. Okay, back to business. First on the docket, killed the Guardian. This fight went a lot like it did on the first run. No canisters plus no stasis equals lots of flame fuel lost. The upside is there's a bench literally right here, so I use that to my advantage. Just like in the last chapter, I nabbed a capacity upgrade mid-fight to get a reload of flame fuel, which helped me put the Guardian down. The Brute again was easy to deal with, and we come to the run killer once more. Just as before, the Weezers have to be killed with something other than the flamethrower, and melee does the job for most of them. The Weezer in the nutrient vat that caused me problems on the first run has to be killed with either kinesis or a different weapon, so I used a piece of broken box to blast its disgusting humpback until it died. Okay, with all of the poison pods dead, now it's time for the Leviathan. Alrighty, moving on. Chapter 7 went simple enough, pretty much the same as the first run. No parts that I had to try without stasis on this go-around. I had better luck with the gravity beam room this time, except for an exploder blowing me to smithereens. But luckily for my noob ass, I was used to this kind of failure, so I saved before restoring gravity, so I wouldn't have to redo the entire room. I grabbed the access key and made my way down to level D to meet up with my woman. Nicole only died once this time. I grabbed the SOS beacon, smacked that sumbitch to a fat rock, get told to run more errands, fight off the oogly booglies, and move on to the next chapter. Oh, it should also go without saying, but the gravity tethers in this chapter still cause you to fail the challenge. Chapter 8. This one gave me problems last time because I was having a near-death experience through the entire thing, and I had the double guardians to deal with. So let's see if it goes better this time. Technically, it did go better overall, but better doesn't mean good. An exploder killed me, then a leaper killed me, then I spent an eternity in the guardian hallway while the guardians killed me repeatedly. The hallway only took 7 attempts, but each one is a painfully tedious waiting game. I chose to play it safe, which means stepping out to give it a quick blast of hellfire, then quickly step back in like a little bitch to avoid getting hit by the pod's projectile. It's slow and agonizing, but with enough patience, they can be killed. Now that that's taken care of, I have to deal with the divider. Last time I just gave it a stasis shot and ran by it, but I don't have that option now, and as much as I believe I could just outrun it anyway, I wanted to prove I'm at least somewhat of a man and kill it for real. So I burned it to a crisp, and it even took less ammo than I expected it to. I even got a ruby semiconductor out of it. Hell yeah. You know the drill for the rest of this chapter. Fix the comms array, kill the slug boss, make a mad dash for the exit. I did kill the divider in the atrium this time, just to prove I ain't no bitch. Alright, here's where the real challenge begins. I relied on stasis heavily during the first run of the Valor section, and the first mountain to climb without it is to try and kill the first gang of Twitchers. Alt fire is nearly ineffective against them since they only get knocked back once, if at all. So I opted for trying primary fire again. While this approach wasn't perfect, it worked out a lot better. If you keep enough space between you and the Twitcher, the Flamethrower's primary fire can stop its attack multiple times. I'd use that to burn off its legs, then use a burst of alt fire on its head and arms while it's on the ground. Again, this wasn't perfect, but good enough to get by without dying. The next section has all the exploders and twitches that I baited into the laser dissector on the first run, along with the divider. But because I'm not a bitch and I'm no longer afraid to fight dividers, this time I made it my first target and obliterated it. The exploders were child's play. Kind of. One last major hurdle, the barracks. It all went well and good, until I ran out of ammo on the last 2 exploders and Twitcher. None of the item lockers gave me any flame fuel, so my only option at the moment was to run around the room to try and figure out a plan. During my panic, the second exploder dropped down right in front of me and nearly blew me to pieces. But the good news is, it did blow the Twitcher to pieces. But I still had 1 exploder left and no ammo. I wasn't going to risk baiting its attack, so I had one thing I could try. The store. To my pleasant surprise, the store is available to use during this ambush. So with just enough space between me and the exploder, I hurried into the store, bought some flame fuel, and blew it to smithereens. For some unknown reason, the one death in this chapter came at the hands of the brute. Maybe his hunger for raspberry jam was too insatiable. Or I just suck ass. No, it's definitely the former. I hightailed it out of there with my glorious winnings, and we move on to the next chapter. 10 is a long chapter, so let's try and speed through it. As per usual, I dismember the bodies in the commons to prevent a massive headache of a fight later, but I have to tediously burn off all the limbs. Slow, but at least that's taken care of. I immediately acquire the level 5 suit, kill the lurkers in the basketball court, and grab the nav card. I was going to stick around to play 0G basketball, but as it is a kinesis minigame, I felt it wasn't fair, so I skipped it. It's fine though, my flamethrower and rig health have been fully upgraded anyway. I returned to the commons to fight the enhanced slasher and infector, which somehow found a corpse I hadn't fully dismembered, but I flexed on it and showed it who's boss before it became a problem. I fucked up the dividers in the mess hall this time, but that was probably a mistake, as when they split apart they become a huge nuisance. Regardless, I grabbed the crew key and took off without dying. The guardian was the usual headache, and the tentacle drag only killed me once this time. Now here's the first of 3 pants-shitting moments in this chapter. Sleep Bunks B. It was super fun, and by fun, I mean miserable. I really wanted the items in here, so I tried baiting necromorphs into the entry hallway, where it would restore oxygen and I'd be able to fight with my flamethrower. The first 2 slashers were killable, but the Pregnant would not follow me into the hallway, so I accepted that this strategy would be long and tedious, if it even worked on all the other enemies, and opted for just hoofing it instead. And as fate would have it, this one Pregnant would be what kills me. I grabbed what I needed and made a run for the door, but it wouldn't fucking open. It literally stayed shut just so the Pregnant could kill me.
Please contact repair specialist.
Tight. Brown Pants scenario number 2. Sleep bunks C. I almost shit my entire ass fighting off the hunter and slasher at the start. I survived thanks to my lightning fast reflexes and just baited everything around the locked room again until Kendra decided she wanted to keep me alive.
Nope.
Then the regenerator, with all its spooky nonsense, forced me to pop out another turd by dropping down right by the elevator. The last shit mountain to climb was the shuttle hangar. After listening to Dr. Dingleberry run his gob for a literal 2 whole minutes, we barbecued the 4 pregnarts and it's time for the final showdown with the hunter. I expected this to be a doozy without stasis, and it was. I almost had that big bastard down for the count when the Twitchers ran a train on my ass. Can I just say that Twitchers wouldn't be so bad if they couldn't lunge at you quicker than you can distance yourself from them? They do this bullshit reach out to slash attack thing that you can't dodge, and I really fucking hate it. Anyway, I managed to subdue the regenerator long enough to make it back to the control room with all my parts, and absolutely incinerated that miserable bastard. Thank God that thing is dead. Two chapters left to go, my dudes. I took care of the exploder and perganonant in the cargo room, then looted it before bringing up the marker. This meant not having to deal with any other necros or the tentacles. Then between each stage of moving the marker, I saved the game to act as a checkpoint. Doing this entire room with the flamethrower, no scam, without dying, is pretty frustrating. Even with my checkpoints, I died a couple times. I don't know how this happened, but it was an easy kill, Lamau. I was able to move the marker into place without walking past the tentacle, making it hella easy to dip out of the cargo room when the last wave of necros spawned. The flight lounge fight sucked ass. Woof. Okay, after not fucking that part up, finding some treasure, loading the marker, and getting swindled by someone I considered a dear friend, we have one last thing to take care of. I ran back to the store to sell some junk for beer money, and once again put a guardian in its place. Do I really even need to talk about these at this point? With the penultimate chapter now done, all that's left is to once again travel down to the planet and cremate a big scary squid beast. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch, and it should be very interesting. In the first run, I relied on stasis for the first quarantine and the excavation site. I'm expecting both to be a forceful and unwanted smack in the beanbag. My strategy with the quarantine was to focus on the slashers primarily, since they like to run up on you like assholes. One at a time, I burnt them to a crisp, until this one here decided he ain't gonna play that way. I tried putting some space between me and that crusty bastard, but I had made a fatal error just moments before this in assuming I had fully disposed of an exploder. Spoiler alert, I had not. Fuck. Round 2, same strat. Focus on the slashers, but also avoid the exploders. Obviously. It went okay. Despite getting sliced and diced to near death several times, not being 100% sure if the light shining in my eyes was from the flames of my gun or from the fires of hell as I quickly approached the afterlife, I did manage to outlast every last necromorph in this ambush. An acceptable performance. The last 2 guardians in the game are next, and just for the sake of consistency, I disposed of them like each one that came before. The wind tunnel and brute were easy peasy lemon squeezy, so let's just move ahead to the excavation site. This was a bitch. No stasis means having to deal with almost every necromorph that wants my raspberry jam. This normally would be tolerable, but in case you've forgotten, my gun is slow as shit. I mean, just look at this. The first attempt, and I'm trying to fight off an enhanced lurker, an enhanced slasher, and 3 twitchers. Holy hell. Each subsequent attempt went just as miserably as the first. At first I tried moving the marker as far ahead of me as possible, but that didn't work. I tried fighting off the necromorphs, but that didn't work either. I then tried moving the marker quickly down the platform and hopefully just tank a few attacks. Surprise, that did not work. Frustration was quickly building as I knew this was the final mountain to climb. I had already done the hive mind fight once before without stasis, so this was all I had left to figure out, and I felt like I was getting nowhere. On the next attempt, I managed to kill a few necros along with the first tentacle, but the twitchers were again too fast for me. Attempt 5, and this time I ran down to the far end of the catwalk right away. I was able to fight off a couple necros and blow off the last tentacle, but the middle one quickly got vengeance for its fallen brother. Then, finally, by some massive stroke of luck, let's be honest, it wasn't skill, I managed to withstand the torment from dead Flanders. During the small windows of time I'd get from killing a few necros, I'd opt to take out a tentacle. Even though I very nearly died right at the end, my gamer reflexes kicked into maximum overdrive and I got the marker loaded up.
I knew you'd return to me. We are whole again, Isaac.
Fuck you! And fuck your marker!
My former friend appears out of thin air and tries to slander the good name of my girlfriend.
See? You're insane.
Lies! Lies and slander!
In preparation for the hive mind, I sold some worthless junk and stocked up on a lot of ammo for the fight. I bought so much flame fuel that it put the sun itself to shame. The fight went just as it did in round 1, with one exception. I didn't die like a bitch this time. The first 3 eyes, burned. The next 2, roasted. The hearts, incinerated. The hive mind is dead, and this challenge finally reaches its end. Okay, so where do we stand? Well, at the end of the first run, we determined that beating the game with the flamethrower as your only weapon is not possible. The only obstacle being the gravity tethers in Chapter 7. Those have to be damaged with a different gun. So run 1 ended with a whopping 1 failure. But run 2 has literally twice as many failures. Trust me, I did the math. The gravity tethers in 7 obviously were a failure again this time around, but the poison pods in 6 were as well. The flamethrower is rendered completely useless against them, and since Scam isn't allowed to bypass that handicap, that brings the total to a staggering 2 whole failures. Mega sad. So now that you've sat through a vast amount of uninteresting gameplay and dialogue, let's actually ask the question this whole shindig is about. Can you beat Dead Space 1 with only the flamethrower? No. No, you cannot. But that about does it for this video. I appreciate all of you that stuck it out to the end. If you enjoyed, consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. It costs literally nothing, and you'll see videos in your feed as soon as I upload them. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.